Hi guys, welcome back to another video. So today we are going to be working in my new sketchbook today. So if you haven't seen Saturday's video, please check that out if you wish to see my previous sketchbook in sketchbook tour fashion. But today I am going to be using this one. So this is a notebook that I designed that has a kind of like hydrangea, I believe that's how you say it, design on the front and the back as kind of like an overall spread. So I decided that I wanted this to be my next sketchbook. So let's go ahead and work on our actual kind of like intro, hello, or like first page of the book. So I went ahead and already sketched out who I'm going to have in kind of like the theme for this one. So in previous sketchbooks, I usually pick one character if I can to be kind of like the representative of the entire sketchbook. So I kind of alternated before from Masaki and Wonu from 17, but because I do have a carrot version notebook that I could potentially use as a sketchbook, I'm gonna save Wonu for that one in the future. So today we are going to be drawing my OC Masaki. So I went ahead and already sketched him out with just a graphite pencil. I am going to be using gouache today, so let's go ahead and start with the prep. So for me, I do like using watercolor to kind of plan out the colors and just kind of like prime the paper to get ready for using with gouache, because I find that sometimes the first layer of adding any kind of like watery medium on top of this paper tends to sit on the top and it does like a little bit of beading, so it's a little bit easier for me to put down some kind of texture that dries on the paper to let the gouache adhere a little bit easier too. And I could use watered down gouache, but I'm more used to using watercolors, so I'm going to be using that as kind of like my base. So to show more of like the entirety of the painting process, I am going to be doing the majority of this in time lapse so you can kind of see it all come together. And I am just kind of like briefly planning out the colors for Masaki here. So my kind of initial plan that I wanted to do was to have everything be very light and a little bit on the warmer side, but I do have an issue with always making my gouache paintings a little bit darker than intended. So it's not as like airy and light in color scheme as I wanted it to be initially, but I think it's okay. With the help of like the manila color in the inside cover, everything turns out a lot warmer, and I feel like it just kind of fits the current weather or like the season, since we're still in like fall, but it's like slowly transitioning into winter still. So I forgot to mention at the very beginning, this sketchbook that I'm using is technically a notebook. I've used several of these versions in the past. I tend to get these made with Bow Grace, but in the future I'm gonna look at some other manufacturers to get some more varied kind of like artist paper, either like mixed media, thicker cardstock or something, because that would be nice to do instead of just always doing these types of like notebook paper. Even though in the future I will make some actual like notebooks where it has like the grids or the lines or dots so that people can use it as like planners and have a little bit of a template rather than keeping them all blank. But because I do have a few designs out, I usually keep one notebook of each design for myself, which is why I have an overabundance of like notebook designs that I can use for my own sketchbooks. So kind of with our initial colors kind of finished with the watercolor, you can kind of see I'm keeping like a wooden coaster, blank coaster thing that my friend gave me as a little platform or something to keep my cover entirely flat, since the beginning of the sketchbook always has one side more slanted. I'll probably add some footage at the very end, but I ended up cleaning up a bit of my gouache, so I remixed some of the paints up. I cleaned off my palette entirely, which I dislike doing because I feel like it's a little bit of a waste of paint. But initially, because I planned to have this to have a much lighter color palette, I thought it'd be easier for me to mix a lot brighter and lighter colors without it getting too muddy if I had a completely new and untainted palette, in a sense. I know I could have used like a different surface to mix my colors instead of cleaning off my entire palette, but it was getting a little bit hard to mix colors that were like light and very contaminated, I guess, in a sense. So I needed like a new start, which I'm kind of happy I did, because I did have a lot of fun painting this particular piece, even though it's very simple. The thing is, I feel like some people have mixed responses to doing like a first page, as do I, but some people feel like, oh, having a more extravagant piece as your first one's more intimidating. I've seen some people say the opposite, where if you have a really good first page, then the rest of them, like, you don't really have to live up to the same expectation, if that makes sense. And then some people have the opposite, where you should have like a more simple and clean first page so that everything else can be a little bit less pressure, if that makes sense too. So for me, the intro page, I just want it to be inviting and something that I don't dislike looking at if I actually have to keep looking at the front, which oftentimes I do because I always keep binder clips clipped to the cover of my sketchbook. So I will see the front page over and over and over again. So something that I like to paint obviously is any character that I enjoy. So I usually picked Wanu or Maseki a lot because they were very fun to draw. I find them very endearing anyway, so that's probably my favoritism kind of speaking. But for the most part, as long as the front page is something that I like, I will stick to that idea. I don't really plan things to be super extravagant. Sometimes I go a little bit more into the cover, and sometimes I pull back a lot more. So I think the sketchbook before this one, I made the inside cover, both the intro and kind of like the end page, very simple and minimalistic in terms of color and composition. This one's simple in composition, but I like the color combination, and because I had a lot of fun painting with the gouache, I actually really like this one. It also might be the fact that I was a little bit less precious with how I was kind of like applying the paint in a sense. I always struggle using gouache, finding a good mixture between like letting things be painterly, because I want to change like hues and colors and add more like shapes and forms, but I don't want it to look super messy, and I struggle with mixing colors at times. And then I want it to also look super clean. So I feel like I never find a good combination. But for this one, because I was able to mess around with the colors in a way, I was able to blend the sweater and like the kind of like scarf a little bit more. I actually really like this one quite a bit. So hopefully, I don't know if I should say this super early, but I think the last few times I've ever done like the goodbye page and the end of my sketchbooks, they've always been like super low energy, and I tend to dislike them a lot. There's very few of them that I think I did them justice. I think there's like one Maseki, actually there's two. I think there's one laying on a bunch of clovers while he's like sleeping. Another one is with like a bunch of peonies, and then the other one that I'm thinking of is like a Wanu Game Boy-ish kind of aesthetic. And I'm not talking about the most recent one in like my baby's breath sketchbook. I'm talking about like, this is like a while ago. But this sketchbook is probably going to take me well into 2025, definitely. And if you haven't noticed, the start date for the sketchbook is on November 7th. So I did end up taking a 1-week break from sketching anything truly like traditionally in a sketchbook for a week. I think part of it might have been I was just tired from doing Inktober and the pressure of having to do the first page. Even though I mentioned in like previous sessions that sometimes I leave the first page to a different day, and then I will just sketch on the second page and carry on until I'm ready to film the first page. But in this case, I did not really have the urge to do any sketching, so I definitely just saved everything until the very end. But I'm kind of glad that I did, because the result of this one I actually really like. I think near the end of the video, I do show briefly my thumbnails, and I kind of wish I did the other one. So my other plan was, obviously I wanted to keep a lighter color palette. I keep struggling with this, so I will definitely try to play with gouache a lot more in the sketchbook and see if I can achieve the color palette that I've always imagined, which is a lot of like white, yellow, blue, and I think it's like purpley pink. So almost like Easter-ish colors, but in a more like pearlescent way rather than having too much warmth of yellow. So I'm going to experiment and see if I can do that. Maybe I'll do some like watercolor pieces as well, because sometimes it's easier for my brain to wrap around the color palette and just stuff either digitally or with watercolors, just because it's like both of them are kind of mediums I'm a little bit more used to, while with gouache I'm struggling just with the medium itself. Then I'm struggling with like color mixing and all that. So I will take my time slowly learning gouache to the point that I will feel more comfortable because I definitely flip-flop between, oh, I think I'm doing okay with gouache to, oh, I hate gouache again, and have like that really love-hate relationship, which I wish I didn't have, but the painterliness is just something I really struggle with. So I definitely will just continue trying to paint more in the sketchbook. So hopefully you guys won't get sick of gouache videos as I'm moving forward. But kind of keeping back on topic, I had another sketch where Masaki was like sitting on the edge of my sketchbook, and I was gonna have him reading a book or writing in a journal or something and have little buds sprouting kind of around him. And then by the time we get to the halfway point, I was gonna do some kind of like updated version where the plants like grow or something, or like it's just something related to the hello page. And then the end page will have like overgrown plants, which could signify kind of like just the passage of time, which I thought could have been cool to do, but I definitely was not up to draw that much foliage, which you will see a little bit later in this video, that the flowers become so simplified, which I'm not too mad about because I do like the fact that Masaki's the most in focus for everything. And the yellow accents of the flowers, which I didn't mention by the way, I believe these are Icelandic poppies. I've seen these floating around quite a bit, and unfortunately I've seen a lot of like AI versions, but luckily I was able to find, I think that's what they're called, and they have like a nice variety of like softer colors that are a little bit more vibrant. So I think there's like pink, white, yellow, kind of like orange, and just like they look very pastel almost sometimes. So I thought they were very cute, and I do like the combination of obviously yellow and teal or turquoise together, if you haven't seen my Inktober drawings at all. Yeah, this color combination I just really like, and because the manila color of the inside of the sketchbook does give everything that more of like a warm touch, I feel like the entire piece kind of becomes a little bit more cohesive as a color palette because of that. So yeah, I really liked it, and I feel like the text that I'll do at the very end will help tie everything together and gives it a better sense of balance. So for now, I'm going to try to rack my head around what I want to be the end page, because this time, similar to my previous sketchbook, which is the one that I did with the Kaizen inking version, I did not really plan out the ending, or like I guess like the goodbye page all that much, but I do like to keep the theme the same and the character the same, and most likely the color palette also, but I haven't thought of what I want the goodbye page to actually look like, or if I want to change the composition or anything. So if you guys have any ideas what you think might be a good indication of the end of the sketchbook with Masaki and this kind of aesthetic, or just like anything that might show the passage of time, maybe I will still go with that overgrown idea. In terms of like the composition, most likely I mirror the illustration, so Masaki will be on the left hand side, just because I don't really want to paint the main figure on the back pocket, because I don't know if the back pocket's going to be really used or not, but sometimes it gets a little bit beveled and warped, and it might make it a little bit more difficult to paint on. But talking a little bit more about the painting, after I painted majority of like the folds, making the forms, getting the lighting somewhat correct, I ended up switching to I guess like the smaller brush that I've been using more often, and I did the line art. And this is kind of like the reason why I know I like to push the darker tones at the very end, and sometimes I lose that sense of airiness. In this case, it didn't really happen in the very beginning anyways, so I wasn't really too bummed about it, but I like doing the line work after. I think it just helps tie everything together. I really gave up on the scarf part at the very end, which you see me painting right here, because for some reason I was just not able to get the gouache to really lay down flat. It was always like watery and translucent. So yeah, I ended up just making it super simple, and the colors turned it out to be a little bit different compared to the rest of Masaki's color palette. But I think okay, it's like kind of okay, since there's enough transition colors to make the color palette still remain the same. But the last thing I like to do is obviously the hello portion. So as for my intro, I do like putting hello as like the front page and then goodbye at the very end. You could definitely do just like the date, or you could do start and finish, start and end, start and fin, whatever you want. I think the last time I asked you guys, a lot of you actually do a kind of like an intro and an outro page of some sort. So I think it's kind of neat. And I like hearing your guys' thought, whether or not you like enjoy working on an intro page or not, or if you like to keep it simple, or do you like to make it extravagant. For the text this time, and I feel like moving on in the future, every time I want to do it with color, I will do it with alcohol markers. It's just easier for me to match the colors a little bit more accurately. And last time I did text with gouache, I was just really struggling with it to make it look super clean. So yeah, also I think for this one, I looked up the font on 1001fonts.com, which is what I like to do for perusing for any fonts. So I think I didn't save the font name, so I won't be able to match it fully at the very end, but hopefully I can. I added like a drop shadow of the yellowy gold color at the very bottom of the text just to make it look like it's reflecting a little bit. And I think the spread of our first page is actually done. So I ended up showing you guys the little sketches that I did, and the top one has like my previous idea. But hopefully you guys enjoyed watching today's video and come along with me as I sketch a lot more in the sketchbook. So you can see this has a lot of pages. Oh, I forgot to mention this. So at the very top where you can kind of see all the signatures, I do like to count out where the halfway point is, find the halfway point of the sketchbook, and then mark down where the halfway with some kind of text. So this way is like a way for me to have motivation to work in my sketchbook completely, as kind of like that extra push if I ever feel like I'm not progressing too much. Just seeing the halfway point just means like, oh, you're past half, which means after this point you will be closer to the end. But I think that's it for today's video. Thank you for coming along with me, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!